Disclaimer: this video is for educational and historical purposes only. Panama Red, 4XW. By admin, published March 11, 2013, updated January 24, 2021. Back in the mid-70s, an old red dog with cropped ears appeared on the dog fighting circuit in Texas and Oklahoma. He had a very good mouth, and eventually became a champion of record with the sports match reporting magazines. This dog was called Panama Red, presumably after the popular variety of marijuana that was available on the black market at around that time. When I came on the scene in Oklahoma in late 1976, Panama Red had already won 2 matches. I first heard of him when Jim Uselton had a friend of Danny B's named Rusty Condition, and handled Jim's King Solomon for a match into David Eubanks' Zeus. Zeus had recently been matched into this Panama Red dog, and the outcome was quite controversial, and those in the fraternity who had witnessed the match there in the southwestern USA were still talking about it. According to seasoned and reliable dog men I had met like Doug Blair, the big plumber of Alligator fame, and George Gilman, owner of Pusher, Gomer, Chapter 400, etc., and others, this is how that match went. Eubanks' Zeus was a very talented and smart dog that could make many of them look foolish in the box. He was in the process of making one-time winner Panama Red look foolish in their match when at about the half-hour mark Red jumped over the wall. At that point the match would have been over, according to the rules, except that Zeus still had a hold of Red's stifle. Either Red was pushed back into the box, or he came back over the wall on his own, but in either event he grabbed Zeus' front leg and bit down on an artery, causing blood to spurt out of the wound. A handle was made, and according to witnesses David Eubanks was trying to stop the bleeding with blood-stop powder, which should be a rules violation, and when he couldn't control the bleeding he conceded the match to save his valuable warrior. That match made Panama Red a 2-time winner, but a very controversial one. In November 1976, there was a very large convention coming up, to which I had been invited. Danny's friend and partner Dwight H., a sometime rodeo cowboy, was putting it on in the Texas Panhandle near where he lived. I learned that Dwight had a dog named Poco matched into the Panama Red dog in that show. At that time I was as green as the grass on an April afternoon, and, as I felt I was technically in the same camp with Danny and Dwight, I constantly pelted Dwight with questions about his Poco dog. Could he bite? Had he been tested hard? How did he think he could handle the hard-biting red dog? All I could get out of Dwight was evasive and vague answers though, and Danny wasn't very forthcoming about Poco either. I didn't have the experience to think so at the time, but in retrospect I believe this match was what is called a gate fight. That means the match was made for the express purpose of running up the gate at this big show, which was expected to attract around 300 people or so, and in fact it did. The idea is with that many people coming and paying $5 fight to get in, one could afford to lose the $500 bet, if it was even that much, on a gate fight, and recover 300x $5 or $1,500 gate money. And on the other side of the coin, it would get Panama Red an easy 3rd win and championship. Not a bad deal for either side, nor the first time something like that had been done. After all the facts were in on Red and I saw him perform, I wonder if there was even a bet at all. In time it will become clear why I felt this way. The big day came, and I rode out to the event with a famous guest, my friend Dick Stratton, who was later sorry he came, I think, as we all were to be before the day was over. But back to the match. Red was a rangy dog in condition with a big head and a rather long muzzle, not the bulldoggy-looking type. Poco was a chocolate-colored dog, and looked typical of many of the Tudor Mayfield-bred dogs that were being campaigned at that time. They washed and weighed the dogs for Dwight's match into Panama Red, and put them in the pit. From the start Red dominated, although I did notice he made a hot turn at about the 15-minute mark, throwing his shoulder out at Poco, and panting while looking into the crowd. Poco seemed content to take a break from that hard mouth, and catch some air himself. This is not the desired behavior in a match dog, of course, and I remembered the stories of Red jumping the wall against Zeus. Before long Red had bitten the slow-moving, untalented Poco down in the stifles, and he sat out the count at 32 minutes. The only other detail of interest I can remember about Red is that he scratched like a kid going to class on the day of the big test, the one he hadn't prepared for. and his handler seemed in no hurry to get him to the scratch line. I remember thinking that Danny's 10-year-old daughter, Karen, could have made handles that Oklahoma Shorty seemed to miss when trying to catch his dog out of holds. For an experienced professional, he always seemed awfully clumsy when trying to handle Old Red. Experience taught me that is often the case when a handler doesn't really want to get to the scratch line. In March of 1977, I happened to witness Red's fourth and final match against Jake Belville's Beans dog. This match was almost a carbon copy of the Poco match, except that Beans was probably a little better dog. This had the effect of making Red turn even worse when he got hot and causing his scratches to get even slower than before. The result was the same, however. Red bit Beans down in the stifle, and he sat it out in exactly the same time as Poco had, 32 minutes. The really interesting phase of Red's career, to me, at least, actually came after he was retired to stud. It is my belief that his owners decided to quit while they were ahead, and sell some pups instead of going for Red's grand championship, and possibly getting him stopped cold as his gameness seemed to be getting shorter all the time. Just my opinion, but their subsequent actions seemed to bear that opinion out. Red's gameness hadn't impressed anyone who had actually seen him go, and frankly, if he had quit, a career champion isn't going to sell many pups. In the ensuing months, two things of interest to this story happened. One is that full-page ads started being run in the magazines proclaiming what a great dog Panama Red was, and pups were being sold off of him as fast as they could be produced, apparently. The other is that a crowd of admirers started showing up at the shows with t-shirts, sweatshirts, ball caps, etc., with CH Panama Red emblazoned on them. Actually, as the photo above shows, this started a little before Red was retired. These people were, of course, the same people who had been associated with Red when he was being campaigned, except, now that Red was retired, they seemed much more confident in his fighting ability than they had when there was still some chance of him quitting in a match, and they seemed very confident in his ability to produce good dogs. This behavior was unheard of in those days, the first time I had ever seen such blatant promotion of any well-known dog at an actual dog show. I couldn't help but think it was a lot of admiration to bestow on a dog that acted so badly in the pit, when I had no inclination to breed to or even raise one puppy out of. I later found out what that was all about. Following this text on the dog, you will find, in chronological order, a series of ads run in the Sporting Dog Journal by the Panhandle Boys, along with reports and certificates to illustrate the events in question. Here is a brief synopsis of the events as they transpired in those pages. Item number 1. Sept. October. 1977 issue of the journal, we see Red's championship certificate listing his wins along with his pedigree. As a footnote, I once overheard Don Mayfield say that Panama Red was a dog which was found on the streets of Fort Worth, Texas, if I remember correctly. One thing I am certain of in my mind, although I can't prove it, is that Red is not bred the way his papers show him to be. Most of those old Tudor dogs looked quite different from Red and acted quite different too, usually showing to be extremely game dogs in the pit. And his breeder T. Sherwood was certainly capable of selling some papers, too. May-June 1978, issue of the journal, one of the early ads, run for Red pups by the Panhandle Boys. It is the date which is important here, as you will see. At the bottom of the ad are the address and phone number of Richard Bridges, and the phone number of Van Hensen. 3. Sept. October 1978, issue of the journal, an ad this time extolling the virtues of one fat Albert Donnie McCullough, who is doing well with the first of Red's pups, even winning matches with one as young as 13 months of age. Pups are allegedly selling like hotcakes, and prices are up from $225/200 to $250 for all pups. Bridges and Van Hensen are still in the ad as contacts, and now McCullough is added also. 4. Jan-February 1979 issue of the journal, first page of show news, and McCullough wins with Turk, a one-time winner sired by Ch. Panama Red. Under the photo it has Turk's dam as McCullough's pepper. Turk also won Best in Show honors out of 3 matches. 5. Mar-April 1979, issue of the journal, and we see another ad from the Panhandle Boys. They are announcing Turk's second win, and saying if he wins another he will be the first champion off of Red, announcing a second matchup coming for another son of Red, Sweet William, who has won one, and announcing a first matchup coming for Captain Crunch, presumably off of Red, and saying there are 15 more Red pups coming up behind them. They then pronounce Red the greatest bulldog alive today, when in combat, and say he is not standing at stud to any female for any amount. There follows a lot of hot air about Bridges' career in the dog game. Line-bred red pups are now $400 each. 6. May-June 1979, issue of the Journal, one issue after the aforementioned ad, and Van Hensen and Jim Price take out what is presumably an ad saying, "Red is a great dog, Red is a 4-time winner, and here come the surprises." Red is owned entirely by Price and Hensen, and that any other seller of pups, breedings etc., is fraudulent? Only 2 of Red's pups have been in conditioned, moneyed matches, and they are named Panama Red, and Captain Crunch Turk is not mentioned at all, nor is the Tommy dog who was promoted earlier, nor is there any mention of the 15 pups allegedly coming up behind these dogs. C. Bridges, his name was Richard in the ads, sold his interest in Red over 2 years ago, and has bought no breeding since. Price and Henson also say they do not go by the Panhandle Boys, and that the owners of Red say he is open to stud. 7. July-August issue of the Journal, and we see a stud ad by none other than Donnie McCullough for his Turk dog, and Turk isn't off of Red or out of Pepper as we had been told, but is bred by my old friend Ronnie Anderson. McCullough does however say he has a litter by Old Red. In 79, issue of the Journal, and we see Turk's championship certificate and he is bred the same as in McCullough's ad, previously, not off of Panama Red. So, what can be inferred from all this? At the very least you can conclude that apparently some of those Panama Red puppies being sold by Mr. Bridges were not really off of Red, and that the Panhandle Boys weren't above telling a lie or two to sell pups. There certainly seemed to be a rat in the woodpile somewhere in the story. I knew Van Hensen, and he was indeed one of the owners of Panama Red. And as far as I know, Van was an honest dog man. The rest one will have to deduce for oneself from the pages included and what this writer saw with his own eyes, and heard with his own ears if you like. Oh yes, and why were we sorry we all went to that big show? After paying $45 head to get in, about halfway through the show we were surrounded by deputy sheriffs commanded by a guy from the FBI. We were told to drive to the courthouse where we waited for several hours for a judge to come arraign us. Apparently the judge had better things to do and they eventually turned us loose, and told us not to come back. That was back in the days when it was a misdemeanor. No one was kicked, beaten, cursed, cuffed, or shot by the police. The good old days, I guess. This writer is aware there are a few owners of dogs today which allegedly trace their lineage back to Panama Red, and it is not our intention to cast aspersions on them, their bloodlines, or their dogs. In this writer's opinion, due to the facts presented herein, their dogs, if game ones, may not even trace back to Panama Red at all, and frankly, coming from one who actually saw him perform, that may be for the best. If you are one who happens to have some of this blood, I would advise, as I do with all other bloodlines, to look a lot harder at the dogs than you do at the papers. Good luck, and our best to you all.